All right, so let's talk about the duty to act. These are other legal things that you have to understand as far as your obligations are concerned. And just like it says here, while you're on duty, you're obligated for care. Duty to act means while you're on duty. Right now, I have absolutely no duty to act. Absolutely no duty to act. One, because essentially I'm still a paramedic, but I'm a teacher, so I don't have any duty to act. My official capacity is a teacher. So that takes away all duty to act. It's got to be sort of clear. Sometimes it's not, but sometimes it is. It's like a lot of times right here, like we talked about earlier about me being in Mesquite and here outside of my jurisdiction. It says on the side, it's not always clear, but that is very clear. I do not have a duty to act here. I'm outside of my jurisdiction. I have no duty to act. When you talk about negligence, you have to, this is the first thing that you have to prove or disprove. Did that person have a duty to act, and did they breach that duty? So my favorite one, to clear up all the myths, let's say I'm driving home, all right? I don't witness this horrific accident, but I come up on this accident. This person's in the, hanging out the window. Blood is running down the side of the car. And as I'm driving by, I look over and go, whew, sucks to be them. And keeps driving, right? Do I have a legal obligation to stop and help that person? Right, because I have probably a moral obligation, but I have no legal obligation because I'm not on duty. Now let's reverse, that was easy. Now let's say that I'm in my jurisdiction. I'm at home. I'm driving to Greenville to get a pizza. Wouldn't that be nice? I run across another horrific accident. Person's hanging out the window, bleeding. I drive by, look at him and go, huh, sucks for you, and keep driving. Did I have a duty to act? Legal, huh? Why not? I'm not on duty. I'm not getting paid. I'm not on duty. Now, so, I mean, there's a lot of maybe little exceptions in there, but not too many. All right, that doesn't really pertain to this. We talk about volunteers and stuff, but we won't bring that up.
Could you ever get in trouble for not acting? For not doing anything?
If I had a duty to act, then I would, yes.
But you were by yourself?
No, because you didn't have any duty to act. So now, scenario 3, I get off at 7 a.m. in the morning. I've been up all night. I'm driving in the ambulance to the station to go home because it's 5 minutes to 7 and I want to go home. My partner, my relief, is at the station. I'm driving. I didn't witness it. Remember, I keep saying that if you witness the accident, then you have a legal obligation to stop. All right? I didn't witness this accident over there. I'm in the ambulance. Do I have a duty to act? Even though 911 hasn't been called yet? Yes, you're right. I have a duty to act. I'm on duty. I have a duty to act. Listen, I'm in the restaurant. I'm eating my meal, and you happen to be eating your meal over there, but you're talking at the same time you're trying to eat your meal, and you become choked. But I'm on lunch. I'm on my lunch break. You're choking over there. Do I have a duty to act? Yeah, I'm still on duty. When EMS goes on duty, they go on duty from the time they clock in to the time they clock out. There's no such thing as set lunch hours. You know, even if you have a set lunch hour, you're on lunch, you still would have a duty to act. the police got in Dallas, they got in trouble for that. It's been a while back. There was something taking place out in the parking lot. They were eating, and the person came in and reported that, hey, there's a problem out in the parking lot. And they didn't get up because they were eating lunch and go take care of the problem. So they got in trouble over that. I don't know what kind, but they did get in some sort of trouble because they had a duty to go do that. Now, law enforcement, on the other hand, you are a policeman 24 hours a day. So don't get that confused. If you're off duty as a law enforcement officer and you see a crime taking place, then you are a law enforcement officer. You have an obligation to go stop that. To some degree. Now, you wouldn't put yourself in harm's way if it was a violent thing with guns, and you didn't have a gun, then you wouldn't put yourself out there. Stop. But you would. You would have a duty to act upon that. Okay, so what happens in negligence is it's just something you've done that you've done it wrong. Probably a breach in standard of care. You have to prove that you have the duty to act, that you breached that duty, that the breach of this duty made the patient suffer harm because of your action or inaction, what you did or did not do, that caused harm to the patient, and then then you would be negligent in that duty once they did that. So we flip back here and we go, they have a breach, they had a duty, they breached that duty, and that action caused harm of that. Then you're guilty of negligence.
What if you didn't know you could act on that?
Ignorance again. Just the same way that when you're driving down this road and you're in a residential area and you're going 45 miles an hour, and the speed limit in residential areas is what?
35.
Yeah, like 25, 30 miles an hour. But nothing's posted, but it's common knowledge that it's 30 miles an hour. You go 45. So ignorance of that is not acceptable. The same way with this. It just wouldn't be acceptable that you didn't know. Because there's a thing out there called the Good Samaritan law. And that Good Samaritan law is for bankers and lawyers and stuff. Teachers that don't know any difference. You guys would be outside that Good Samaritan law. That would not apply to you because you do know the difference. It wouldn't be hard at all for you say, oh, Good Samaritan law, I tried to help, but I did harm. Wouldn't work. Even if you got out of this class and you went into something else, all right, and you helped someone but you did harm to them, you can never claim the Good Samaritan Act because you knew better. You've been taught better. So that wouldn't apply to you. It only applies to lay people who that they don't know any better. It'd be like when you finish this class and you come up on the wreck and you lit the cars on fire, all right, and you pull the patient out of the car, and by pulling the patient out of the car, you sever their spinal cord and put them in a wheelchair. A lawyer, a teacher or a banker could say, oh, Good Samaritan Act, I thought the car was on fire. Okay, and they wouldn't they would be freed up from their troubles. You, on the other hand, they could easily prove that, no, you knew better. Let's say this took 5 years after high school. How do they not prove that? How do they know that you knew better? They don't know anything about you, right? Let's say you're not in the medical. You went to school and now you're a teacher for some weird reason. So you're a teacher now. 5 years later you do this because you forgot about that. you pull this guy out of the car, and now you go to court over it, and you say, oh, Good Samaritan Act. Then the other attorney gets up and say, well, what about that EMT class you took in high school? Did they not tell you not to do that? How do they know that you were in EMT class? Huh?
They pull up like your record, like your past information. Yeah.
Yeah, investigation. They pay somebody to go out and investigate you and see what your background is. Right? They say because they don't have access to your high school records, but I have access to your friends. So I investigate, I see who you hang out with, I look at your Facebook page, and I find out that you're her friend, and I'm like, hey, did y'all ever have any medical training in high school? Oh yeah, we were in EMT class together. Boom. Done. And that's not that hard. That's why that people who are investigators get paid to investigate. They dig in your business, and they can find that out quickly. It wouldn't take rocket science to do it. So, here you're talking about some sort of damages. Now you enter into litigation where you're being sued. And then you go into, was that a criminal act, or was it just a tort type act? This should be a new term for everybody. Does everybody understand the duty to act and negligence? It's pretty straightforward. Abandonment. Once you initiate care to someone, you have to wait until someone that is equal or higher level certification relieves you of that care. So, I come out and I respond to this call. Well, let's give you more of an EMS appropriate one. All right. Let's set the. There's a shooting, gang shooting. One person is shot critically, shot in the head. The other person is shot that is non-life threatening. All right. The paramedic on the truck went out and initiated patient contact with both patients, the critically injured and the non-critical injured patient. The patient that was shot in the head is about to die. The other ambulance that's coming to pick up the non-critical patient is 10 minutes out. The paramedic makes the decision to leave the patient non-critical injury with an EMT. Alright? Really BLS patient, wrap the gunshot up, no problem. The guy in the truck's about to die from the gunshot to the head. They leave the scene and leave the basic life support patient with the fire department on the scene. Alright? That's abandonment, correct? Because they turned over patient care to someone with the less certification. It has to be equal or the same certification that you turn over. Plus, they created an abandonment situation because of the fact that they left. They were the only transporting unit there. The fire truck couldn't transport this other patient to the hospital. Can't transport patients to the hospital on a fire truck. That's why they have ambulances. So they left with the only transporting vehicle. So they left that patient there with someone at a lower level, but also without a means of transportation to the hospital, without the means of an ambulance. So they abandoned that patient. Does that make sense?
How many different levels of authority do paramedics have? Like, how many different ones may there be in the ambulance?
Another paramedic. So if I came out, if I had this patient, I would have to wait on that scene until another paramedic showed up to hand over care. But if I was the only transporting unit there, I couldn't leave because I would abandon that patient. I would abandon the means for transportation. So when you get multiple units coming into a call, the first unit, they have this expression, first on, last off. So the first unit that is on the scene stays on the scene until all the patients are gone except their patient, and then they take their patient. So the way that this call should have been handled is that when I got there, because it happened to me, I was the second unit in, I should have taken patient care of the person with the gunshot wound to the head. And then the unit there would have picked up the second patient. Or at least waited until I got there, assumed care of the patient, and then they could have left. But they didn't do that. So they created this abandonment situation that I tried to correct without just blasting it over the radio. I kept telling the unit, because they said, we're about to get in route. And I'm like, on the radio showing, no, we're 10 minutes out. We're still 10 minutes away from your scene. And they said, well, the patient is non-life-threatening. We are still 10 minutes away from your scene. I was trying to give them a hint that saying, don't leave because you're going to abandon this patient. And they didn't take the hint. And the reason I just didn't blurt it out over the radio was because that's all recorded. So I didn't want to add to their dilemma if there was ever a problem. You know, nothing came of it, but that's a good example of abandonment. So you have to make sure that the person that that's relieving care is at the same or higher level of certification, or you abandon the patient. And that's something that you can also lose your certification over, is abandonment. Good Samaritan laws, we already talked about that. EMS, EMTs, it says may not, but are not, you can change that to are not. I've never heard of any case where anybody with the certification is covered under the Good Samaritan Act. So you should know better. You know, it's like they were saying, gross negligent acts. You know, if it's common sense that you wouldn't do something, even as a banker or a lawyer wouldn't do that, then you can't claim this Good Samaritan Act. But a lot of people pull people out of cars because they believe that the car's on fire when it's just airbag smoke or radiator steam. A trained personnel would know the difference, hopefully, and wouldn't do that. The smoke would come out and they would say, don't touch the patient, don't move them, it's just airbag smoke. So they wouldn't necessarily move the patient. Someone untrained would move the patient. All right, you guys know about confidentiality, right? Patient confidentiality. You guys know about patient confidentiality? Mm-hmm. Do not breach patient confidentiality. The way that and it's hard for you guys, one, that you live in Mesquite, so you may know the people that you're picking up. You may know the people you're taking care of, for one. Here's how the slight breaches or big breaches happen. You go out on your ride-outs, and you come home, and Dad's saying, hey, tell me what you did. So you start telling him about what happened, about a wreck you went on, about a patient you picked up, and all of a sudden he goes, hey, that was Joe from work. I remember that. Then you should say, no more. I can't tell you any more because you would breach that person's confidentiality. Now you obviously don't mention any names, right? Mm-hmm. But if you start describing an incident to the point where you're identifying someone, then you need to stop. That's the slight breach. Here's the other sticky problem. Let's say you pick up, you go on, you're riding out with the Mesquite Fire Department, you go out there and you pick up Uncle Fred. And you take Uncle Fred to the hospital. And you call Pops on the way and say, hey, I just took Uncle Fred to the hospital. You might want to call Aunt Aunt Fred, whatever, you know? That's a gross breach in patient confidentiality.
What if they had to ask you to call them?
That's a good question, but even if they ask you, absolutely not. You call them. I cannot breach that confidentiality. That's a problem where I live. I do EMS in the same county that I live in. A lot of times the same thing. I go out and sit at the football games, right? Football player gets injured. We treat him, transport him, go back up in the stands, watch football. Everybody's like, what happened? What happened? Get away from me. You know? Usually after I have to treat a patient at a football game, I just sit in the ambulance because I have all these people asking me it's a small town. So I have all these people asking me how they're doing. Like, I can't tell you. So I get tired of saying that, so I just stay in the ambulance. So if you pick up a relative, you still can't breach that confidentiality. So you have to understand that patient's rights, even though if you know them, even though if you know that the other relative would like to be informed about this, you can't do it. You have to let them do it. And that situation has came up with me. I picked up a person I knew, and they're like, "You better tell my wife." I said, "You tell your wife." You call them.
What if they give you consent to call?
Still
can't do it.
Well, that's that gray area that you move into, which I stay out of that gray area.
Is it different when it comes to refusal to care? You're not breaching confidentiality because you're asking to call a family member, so you have to give away their information?
Say again?
Is it different when you have to talk about refusal of care because you have to call or ask to call a family member, so you're giving away?
Yeah, that's different. If let's say I call your parents to get refusal of care, and I need to tell them, that's okay. That's a different deal.
So, a minor's parents can ask what happened?
Oh yeah. A minor's parents has all you can tell them everything that takes place. So, again, a good question, because let's say that I get you in the back of the box, back in the ambulance and doing treatment. A question you always ask teenagers, or any female, doesn't matter, any chance of being pregnant. Right? And they come up and they say, yeah, there's a good chance of me being pregnant. I need to know that for my report writing, correct? Your parents have rights to that report. They're your legal guardian.
I didn't think you could tell them, if you asked them not to tell if you thought you were pregnant, I didn't think you could tell them.
Not if you're a minor. They have the right to that information. Yeah, if your parents came up to me and said, what did she tell you in the back of the ambulance? I'm going, tell you everything you tell me.
Do they need
You have that parent has a right to that information. They're your legal guardian. That means that you have no rights, essentially medical.
do
Why?
they need to show you an ID or something? Because what if a stranger comes and oh yeah, I'm her parent or something?
Oh yeah, you'd have to sort of measure that out. Again, you're not responsible for the lie. You may be responsible for not double checking. All right, and that is, again, that's happened. I've had older people come up and say, "Oh, that's my son." I'm like, really? Where do you live? And it doesn't take too many questions to figure out what's their date of birth. There you go.
My dad didn't.
Then the next person they're going to meet is the police officer, because they just committed a felony. They've impeded a emergency process.
What if your parents are out of town, but you have an older sibling that's older than 18?
Parents.
You'd have to call the parents.
Now here's the sticky point on that. I call your parents, it's a protocol issue. Some protocols say that no phone authorization. The parents have to be present. Other protocols say, yeah, you can get phone permission. from the parent. I've had people lie to me over the phone before. They say that they're the parent, they're not. I had them lie to me over the phone. Our protocols say that you can get phone permission, you can be released over the phone. That's a problem. However, let me ask you, how would you prevent that problem from happening? Say your parents are finally getting away and going on that 7-day cruise they always wanted to. They're leaving you and your older sister at home. You get sick, right? And you get all these legalities of this treatment. How can you fix that from taking place? No easier way than that.
Don't they leave that document saying like that? Because I had to do that too. My mom signed a document that my friend's mom was my legal guardian when I went to Florida with him.
Exactly. That's it. They essentially give them temporary medical power of attorney over you when you produce that document. Without that document, if you got hurt in Florida, would they still treat you?
Without the document?
Yeah, they still treat you
Oh,
because
so
they,
minor.
you're minor. They treat you under implied consent. So they go ahead and treat you what they deem necessary. But you're right. That's a good thing to have. Babysitting. Any of you guys babysit? I've been in that situation a bunch of times. Get out there. They just hit the panic button. You know, nothing critically wrong with the patient. Because if it was a critical incident, something critically wrong with the patient, I would treat that baby under implied consent, right? But the babysitter, you need to have some sort of document there saying that you give permission to treat the patient, or you give permission for EMS or the hospital to treat, especially if they're going a ways. Let's say, you know, a lot of times you babysit and they're really close. Let's say they're going over to Fort Worth. They're going an hour or so away. I'd make sure I had that document that would allow you to consent for treatment or something.
But, so like, do you still need the document even though it's like you're...
The other big thing on here is the subpoena. And this applies to you right now. During your ride-outs, during things at the hospital, during anything, never say anything to the media. Your only comment to the media, let's say there was a big nasty wreck, you ran on the wreck, they got the picture of you on the news, took the patient in the hospital, they come up to you, they see you later and say, hey, you were on that ambulance, what happened? No comment. No comment is your only comment to the media. All the ways, all the time. That's my only comment. Media comes up to me, no comment. I have nothing to say. You know, and go on my way.
Don't they know that you can't say anything?
Yeah, but they try to get you to break that confidentiality. The other thing is, someone comes up to you and says, hey, you know, you ran this call. A week later, they find out who you were through TV. They come up to your house and say, hey, here's my card. I'm Larry the lawyer. You ran on that call, and I'd like to talk to you about it. Again, you would say, no comment. You need to get a subpoena. And then I'll meet you in the judge's chambers to talk about it.
Wait, so a subpoena is something, wait, what is that?
A subpoena is a legal document that a judge signs that's telling you to divulge that information. So if I was to, even your clinical records, the things that you guys are going to write during your clinical time, they're not legal, they're not really considered legal documents, but they can subpoena those. So let's say that you ran this reg, months later, you're graduated in college, right? They get through the legal system, they come up, lawyer comes up here to school, or the sheriff comes up here to school, whoever it might be. I'm not sure exactly how they do it here, but they have a subpoena. for your records, because you were in the ambulance during that big nasty wreck, and they want to see those. They hand me the subpoena, I look at it like, okay, then I turn those records over, because I'm ordered by a judge to turn those records over. So that's the only time that you would give any information to anybody. And me, I wouldn't turn those over to whoever gave me the subpoena. I would take those to the judge who signed the subpoena. So I would go up to the courthouse and say, hey, Joe the judge, here's your records that you want, and you turn those over. So you never divulge any information to anybody unless they have a subpoena for it.
But what if the police officers like has that paper and like you said that you would only give it to the judge? What if they're like, I order you to give me the paper or something like that?
I think legally it depends on the way that the subpoena is written. If the subpoena is written for me to hand the papers over to the person executing the subpoena, then I would do that. I would check their name tag, make sure it's the same person that is on the subpoena, then I would give it to them. So you get into a little bit more sticky legalities. You know, if it was a service that issued subpoenas, that came out and handed out subpoenas and their name wasn't on that, then I say, okay, I have the subpoena, I'm going to take the records up to the courthouse and give them to this judge here. So you've got to be a little careful with that, but most of the time, they send an investigator out with the subpoena, or you take them up there. We've always, in EMS, they sent us a subpoena and we always just took it up to the courthouse. We took the records up to the courthouse. It's usually the way it will work. Now, here's another thing. All these little sticky things. Here's another thing. Let's say that there's a police officer on the scene and he's denying like crazy that he was drinking. An adult, right? 18 or over, denying like crazy to the police he was drinking. You get him in the back of the ambulance and you say, hey, I just need to know if you were drinking because of the fact that for medical care, I'm not a cop, I'm a paramedic, I'm an EMT. I need to know for your medical care. No police officer inside the ambulance. Right? You get out, the police are there and say, hey, did he say anything about drinking? Can't tell them. They had to subpoena that information for me to go to court. Now, I don't like drunks, so when I start doing that, usually the cop's behind them. So he gets in the back. When you're on a backboard, you can't see behind you. So more than not, I'm asking these questions and the doors are still open. I'm telling the police officer to come on in. He steps up in the side of the ambulance where the person can't see him, and I ask him the same question. He goes, oh yeah, I didn't kill the cops, but I had 50 beers. Oh. Okay, I'm not going to tell him, but you just did. He's right behind you.
You can't get in trouble for that?
Yeah. Because
You
I
didn't tell them
I
the
didn't tell him,
patient did?
but I have no obligation to tell him that the police officer's behind him either. And so it lessens my time in court when that happens. Because they can subpoena me and have me testify in court what that patient said. That's not a breach in their confidentiality. I'm being ordered by a judge to tell what that patient said, right? It falls out sort of a weird thing about doctor. I'm not a doctor, so there's no doctor-client privilege there.
Could they ask the police to leave?
Yeah, they could ask them, unless they're under arrest. They could ask them to leave. Most of the time, they probably don't be under arrest. So be very careful in these patient confidentiality things. Think before you speak. When in doubt, don't say anything. That's the easiest thing to do. The other thing you look at is you might have medic alert tags, bracelets saying that they're diabetics or they have seizures. They might wear them around their necks, on their wrist. So look for those. Those are always handy, especially if the patient's unconscious. Organ donation. I'm an organ donor. I don't need those things. All right? Give them somebody else that can use them. So you want to look for that organ donor. It's on your driver's license. So we have a fatality accident that's somewhat viable. We might consider doing CPR on them for their organs. That's one of those iffy things. There's a lot that plays into that. But look for that as far as the organs might be concerned. You would definitely want to contact medical control saying, hey, this person's in traumatic cardiac arrest, they were an organ donor, their body's still somewhat intact. Do you want us to continue CPR to bring them in to harvest their organs? So you would get medical control for that as well. That's what I would do. I would advise the hospital, see what they had to say, if there wasn't a protocol. The other thing are safe haven laws. I forget when this all came out, and I'm not exactly sure of the ages of the child. Why this came out was that a long time ago, even now they still have a problem. Moms would deliver children and throw them in the dumpster instead of putting them up for adoption or anything. So this takes place, fire, police, EMS stations, all of our EMS stations are safe havens. That means that mom can have that child up to a certain age, and I don't know what age it is. Somebody Google that up for me. Yeah, and they can come into the knock on the door, come into the ambulance station, hand me the baby, and walk out. And I have no right to ask them any information. They don't have to give me any information at all. Just like ages of safe haven laws. This prevents a lot of abandoned children. It's a good law because it prevents moms having babies and throwing their babies in the garbage. It prevents them just abandoning their babies on the side of the road. They can take the baby to a safe place and leave it there without any sort of repercussion from that. Up to a certain age. So we'll find out that age here in a second, thanks to Google. Crime scenes, this is something that you haven't had to deal with in the past, just going on your regular clinicals to the hospitals, but crime scenes are very important. If they go to a crime scene and the paramedics or EMT are saying, hey, just wait in here, just wait in the ambulance, don't get offended. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to preserve the crime scene. As you go in the door to a crime scene, somebody's writing down your name. Police officer's writing down your name. So you have the potential of, one, destroying evidence, but two, having to come back to court over it. Because what you see, they can subpoena your information. So be careful of the crime scene. You get in there and let's say you have to work in the crime scene, you're doing patient care, be very careful to preserve the evidence. Don't trash the place.
Up to 60 days.
60 days
For Texas. It's
on the
different
safe haven? So
for every state.
3 months? Yeah, so 3 months of age they can turn this child over. So that's quite a bit. So crime scenes, be careful. As you're doing your rotations, they will watch over you in the crime scene. They may not let you in. Depends on what it is. A lot of times I know the guys won't, like if there's a suicide, especially a teen suicide, they'll tell you to wait out the ambulance. You don't need to see that anyway. So there's nothing to see. So they want to preserve the evidence. A lot of times I'll walk in one way and I'll try to turn around and take the same steps backwards when I go into a crime scene if I'm not working the patient. Minimize scene. Work with the police. They always have a good relationship. They may come and pick up stuff that's on your ambulance that you use. So if you use, like me, if I use IV catheters or I use other things, I would put that all in the same bag and say, this is all I've used. Here. Here's their clothes, here's their whatever. I would put that in a bag and give it to the police. Child, elderly abuse, domestic disputes, fights, gunshots, stabs, sexual assault, animal attacks, Cujo bites you, Cujo bites somebody else, you have to report that. Okay? So all these things are reportable by you. You have to report these events legally. You can have criminal charges filed against you on some of these. CPS, if you think the child is abused, make sure that you just don't throw that out. Protect the child. Don't harass the parents. Don't say anything to the parents. Take them to the hospital. Then file your report. Same way with elderly abuse. You see a lot of elderly abuse today. So a lot of the gunshot wounds and stabbings will be reported by the hospital. So that's one of those things that they're going to report it. The police are already there. You just want to make sure that that's reported when it came up. And you have laws and protocols to cover that on these different things.